Have you ever picked up your phone and unlocked it for no real reason? Not because it buzzed, not because someone texted you, not because you actually needed anything. You just opened it, checked one app, then another, then maybe scrolled for a few seconds, closed it, and somehow opened it again just minutes later. Sometimes you do it while waiting, sometimes while eating, sometimes in the middle of doing something else, and half the time, you don't even realize you're doing it. It feels small, normal, harmless. But when a habit happens that often, and that automatically, it usually means something deeper is going on. Because this isn't just a phone habit. It's not really about notifications, or boredom, or bad discipline. This isn't about your phone. It's about your mind avoiding something. Most people think they check their phone because they choose to. But if you slow it down, that's not what's happening. There's no clear decision. No moment where you think, I'm going to check my phone now. It just happens. Your hand moves before your mind catches up. You unlock the screen almost automatically, and by the time you notice it, you're already inside an app. That's not a habit built on intention. That's a reflex. Something your brain has trained itself to do over and over again until it no longer needs your permission. Because at some point, your brain learns something very simple. Reaching for your phone makes discomfort disappear instantly, even if that discomfort is small. A moment of silence, a slight pause, a tiny feeling of restlessness. Before those feelings fully form, your brain interrupts them. With a scroll, a tap, a quick distraction. This is what psychologists call a micro-escape. You're not running away from something big. You're escaping tiny, almost invisible moments that feel just uncomfortable enough to avoid. And the more you do this, the faster your brain gets. It stops waiting for discomfort to appear. It starts predicting it. So now, you don't check your phone because you feel something. You check it to make sure you don't. And once that pattern is set, it becomes incredibly hard to notice, and even harder to control. And this is where it starts getting interesting. You've probably heard this before. You're addicted to dopamine. It sounds convincing, but it's not entirely accurate. Because dopamine isn't really about pleasure, it's about anticipation. It's the chemical your brain releases when it thinks something might happen, not when something good actually happens, but right before it. That changes everything. Because when you check your phone, you're not chasing what's already there. You're chasing what could be there. A message, a notification, a like, something new. Your brain doesn't need a reward to stay hooked. It just needs the possibility of one, and that's what makes this loop so powerful. Every time you unlock your phone, your brain asks a silent question, is there something for me this time? Sometimes the answer is yes, most of the time it's no. But that unpredictability is exactly what keeps you coming back. This is called a variable reward system, the same mechanism used in slot machines. You don't pull the lever because you always win. You pull it because you might win, and your brain loves might, because might keeps the system alive. It creates a loop of checking, waiting, hoping, and checking again. And here's the part most people don't realize. Even when nothing happens, your brain still gets rewarded, because the anticipation itself is enough to reinforce the behavior. So you're not addicted to your phone. You're addicted to the possibility that something is waiting for you. And that possibility never really goes away. Boredom is probably the word people use most to explain this habit. But boredom is often just the surface label. What's sitting underneath it is usually much more revealing. Because true boredom is simple, it's quiet, it's slow, it leaves space, and space is exactly what many people struggle with. The moment life goes silent, something else starts to appear. Sometimes it's uncertainty. That uncomfortable sense that nothing is happening and you don't quite know what to do with yourself. Sometimes it's intrusive thought, a random memory, an unfinished worry, a question you weren't planning to face. Sometimes it's just silence itself. No stimulation, no input, no noise to hide inside. That's why the phone matters so much in this moment. It doesn't just entertain you. It interrupts you. It cuts across whatever feeling was about to rise to the surface and replaces it with instant activity. A screen, a movement, a distraction, something to look at instead of something to feel. So what looks like a harmless habit is often a psychological maneuver, a way of redirecting attention before emotional discomfort becomes fully conscious. Instead of sitting in silence, you fill it. Instead of feeling uncertainty, you cover it. Instead of letting a thought finish, you break the moment in half. And because this happens so quickly, the relief feels natural, almost innocent, but your brain is learning from it every time. It learns that stillness is unsafe, that silence must be interrupted, that discomfort should be escaped the second it appears, and that training changes you. It lowers your tolerance for being alone with your own mind. You're not escaping boredom, you're escaping yourself. One of the strangest things about checking your phone is that it often feels social. You open it, and instantly you see people, their messages, their photos, their opinions, their lives moving in real time. So your brain registers that as connection. Something is happening. People are there. You're included in the flow. But that feeling is often misleading. Because scrolling is not the same as connecting. Seeing people is not the same as feeling close to them. And constant exposure is not the same as real emotional presence. What your phone often gives you is something more subtle, a simulated social presence. It creates the feeling that you're around others, without asking anything real from you. No vulnerability, no depth, no true attention, just enough stimulation to quiet the fear of being alone, but not enough to actually satisfy the need underneath it. And that's why this habit can feel so empty. The more often you check, the more you surround yourself with fragments of other people's lives. But fragments don't create closeness. They create noise, a false sense of togetherness that disappears the moment the screen goes dark. And when that happens, the silence can feel even heavier than before. Because now you've touched connection without really reaching it. That's the emotional trap. You feel less alone, but also less connected. And the longer that pattern continues, the easier it becomes to confuse constant digital contact with something your mind is still deeply missing. Here's the part that turns the whole pattern upside down. People often check their phone to calm themselves, to feel updated, to feel reassured, to ease that restless mental tension that builds in quiet moments. And at first, it seems helpful. You check, your attention shifts, the discomfort softens, but the relief doesn't last. Because every time you look at your phone and there's nothing there, no reply, no notification, no sign of something new, your brain registers that absence. Not as a dramatic disappointment, something much smaller than that. A subtle emotional drop. A tiny signal that says, still nothing. One time doesn't matter much. But repeated over and over, that signal starts building in the background. It becomes tension, a faint uneasiness, a low-level alertness, a feeling that something is missing even when you can't explain why. So naturally, you check again. Not because the last check worked, but because it didn't. Because maybe this next one will finally give your brain the reassurance it was looking for. That's how the loop tightens. Check. Nothing. Slight discomfort, check again. And after a while, the act of checking stops being relief. It becomes maintenance, a way of managing the very anxiety the habit keeps producing. The more you check, the worse it gets. That's the paradox. The habit feels like medicine in the moment, but over time, it quietly becomes part of the problem. By now, this probably doesn't feel random anymore, and that's important. Because habits like this don't just appear out of nowhere, they tend to show up more in certain types of minds. People who think a lot, who replay conversations, who analyze small details, who notice things others don't. Overthinkers, people who don't like uncertainty, who feel the need to check just to make sure everything is okay. Not because something is wrong, but because it might be. People who are highly self-aware, but don't always feel grounded. Who are constantly inside their own head, observing, questioning, evaluating. without ever fully settling. For these kinds of minds, the phone becomes something more than a tool. It becomes a form of control, a quick way to check reality, to confirm something, to stabilize a feeling, even if that stability only lasts a few seconds. Because when you don't check, there's a gap. And inside that gap, uncertainty grows. So you reach for your phone not just for information, but for reassurance. Not just for distraction, but for control. Even if it's only an illusion. And that's why this pattern feels so persistent. Because it's not about the device. It's about what your mind is trying to manage. This isn't random. It says something specific about your mind. And once you start to see that clearly, the habit begins to feel a little less automatic. There's a moment most people never notice. It happens right before you reach for your phone. A small pause, a gap. Nothing has happened yet. No notification, no distraction, just you. And for a split second, your mind is completely open. This is the moment you keep escaping, because inside that gap, things begin to surface. A thought you've been pushing away, a feeling you didn't want to sit with, a quiet sense that something doesn't feel right, not loud, not overwhelming, just present. And instead of staying there, you move. Almost instantly, your hand reaches out, your screen lights up, and the moment disappears, again and again. Over time, you stop noticing that gap entirely. It becomes something you skip without thinking. But that gap matters, because it's the only place where your mind speaks without interruption, where your thoughts form naturally, where your emotions have space to exist, and where parts of your identity, the uncomfortable ones, start to become visible. But you never stay long enough to see them clearly, so you keep escaping, not from something external, but from what's waiting in that quiet space. And the longer you avoid it, the more unfamiliar it becomes, until sitting with yourself feels harder than reaching for your phone. So the next time you feel that urge, that almost automatic pull to reach for your phone, pause for just a second. Not to stop yourself, not to fight the habit, just to notice. And ask a simple question: what am I trying not to feel right now? You don't need to remove your phone from your life. You don't need extreme discipline, because this was never really about the device. It was about awareness. The moment you begin to see the pattern clearly, the reflex, the escape, the gap you keep skipping, something starts to shift. Slowly, quietly, and that's where real control begins. If this resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next deep psychology video.